Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artists Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier, and we're live from the Play Arcade in the National Park at the foot of Union Street, and we're doing our fifth AHA live podcast, and it's the 25th anniversary of AHA. It's hard to believe 25 years have gone by. I remember the very, very first one. Bigger, stronger, better, thankfully. And we've got a great lineup of guests that were invited. We don't know who's going to show up because it's absolute pandemonium out there. Well, who we have from what I can see already is we have Dave Reis, who is our Jazz Series podcast host. He's done a phenomenal job. If you haven't already listened to his podcast, the Jazz Podcast Series brought to you by, underwritten by Fiber Optic Center in the city. You know where they are? They're in that building where that beautiful jazz mural is. We have Kat Knutsen, who is everywhere. She's the publisher of Siren magazine. She's an artist, best known for her participation in Loving Vincent as one of the production artists, painting scenes for that movie. And she's also a musician. She's involved with Long Swan, one of the musical groups in the city. She'll tell you all about it. We also have Ymelda Rivera Laxton, who is the assistant curator of contemporary art at the Bedford Whaling Museum. And she'll be sharing some of her thoughts and ideas. And then later on, we're expecting Christina Maiato Fitz Gerald and her husband, and our newest podcast host. He'll be podcasting a brand new series that'll be premiering shortly, if it not this week, next week. It's the Gallery X documentation podcast series. Sean is going to let us know what Christina has been up to. She's been scanning all of the precious documents, memorabilia, ephemera, and documents from the Gallery X Museum that range back 35 years. So be sure to stay tuned to that. And without further ado, here we go.
I'll go ahead and start. My name is Kat Knutsen, and I'm honored to be here with you guys, ladies, today. I'm excited. AHA's celebrating its 25th anniversary. It's incredible. There's so many things happening outside on Union Street, William Street. I think they have like 4 different stages set up, one at the Whaling Museum, right over here on Union. I just came from Hendrik Hernandez's performance that was going on in front of the jazz mural. That was a project I did back in 2020. Gallery X has a really cool exhibit that's up right now called Portraits of New Bedford. That's really cool to check out. And so I'm here representing multiple projects. One of them's the Siren. So the Siren's designed to try to cover as many of the activities going on in the area that are visual art related and music related.
I think you should. I already get
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Dave's going to be one of the next things. Yeah.
And then there's another project called Long Swan. It's a music project with me and 3 other musicians, Mike Heffernan, Ryan Miller, and Ryan Burke. We're kind of like a shoegaze, rock pop band, all originals. We perform in New Bedford, Providence, Fall River, and we have an EP that's in the works right now. We might be performing at Poor Farm soon coming up. There's also a show we might be doing at Gallery X. But that's a really fun project that's been going for a couple of years. Heffernan and I have known each other for like over almost 10 years now, and so we finally created this original band. It's a original music band. It's a lot of fun. I'm a teacher at BCC. I've been teaching there for about 9 years. I teach in the fine art department, digital media department, and I love the team that I work with, like Eric Durant, Marissa Millard. It's just a really solid team of faculty that focus on student portfolio development, strong foundations, and professional placement within the economy, and also focusing on basic business practice development. And I'm a painter. I love figurative painting. I love portraits. I love archiving. I've always had a passion for trying to capture portraits of these really amazing individuals in the community that are doing really cool things. So that's me in a nutshell. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here with everyone.
Great. Yeah, sure. So I'm the Assistant Curator of Contemporary Art in Community Projects at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. And I like to joke, because it's a long title, that just means that I work with living people. And so, we have, sometimes people are a little surprised when they say, what does contemporary art have to do with the New Bedford Whaling Museum? And, I feel like it's all about having a contemporary perspective on the things in our collections, and then just kind of, history into today, and like how we have many, we've been collecting contemporary art since we opened in 1903, and then we have contemporary artists that we invite to have commentary using the works that we have in our collection. We're very busy all the time. We're turning over new exhibits, and I know that it was nice to touch base with you and with everybody and tell them about our upcoming programs. And we have a big one on October 4th, that Friday, first Friday. That is going to be a talk with an artist we have in our museum right now. She's a Shinnecock artist, Courtney M. Leonard. And she does this project, Breach. She's a ceramicist. She has all these wonderful whale teeth and these installations that are about indigenous sovereignty and access to resources for coastal communities, specifically indigenous coastal communities. And so she's going to be talking with me and with another an artist in her own right who's had an influence on the artist's work, and her name is Holly Nordlum, and she's an Inupiaq hand-poke tattoo artist who has been kind of revitalizing that practice of hand-poke tattooing in Alaska. And yes, and it's kind of a practice in healing, and again, like I said, revitalization. And she, in our collections, we have plenty of things that are from Alaska. And from Inupiaq makers, and so it's really nice to have somebody who's currently in that practice here and having a conversation about it.
Well, I'm the jazz host for South Coast Artists Index. I got invited by a guy to be... Okay, I got invited by a guy, Mr. Fortier. Okay, for an interview, and then I couldn't get away. I'm going to be the jazz host for 10. Nice job, Ron. Yeah, I grew up in jazz. My two uncles played jazz, and they did it for career. And they were the babysitters. I lived in the house, my grandparents' house, and all the family lived there, and I was the first child, and nephew and grandchild. They called me the baby brother. And being they were musicians, they were around the house during the day when everybody else was, so they were my babysitters. I just traveled along with them, doing all the things and the rehearsals and stuff. So I just absorbed it as a child. And then I got to know these people, these men. They treated me, other musicians treated me like I was their nephew. So my passion is on my podcast to talk about these guys, how they started in jazz in the 50s. I'm talking way back, and how they started and what they went through. They didn't learn in Berkeley. They learned in the bedroom, somebody's parlor, they worked out each other. And I want to continue to do that. And I'm getting pleasure out of this because I'm finding a lot of these older men. They're not playing anymore, but I'm finding them, and I've had them on as guests. Some are still playing and telling me those stories. They didn't just play an instrument, what they had to go through to be a musician in those days.
Can you tell us a couple of the names of those musicians?
Well, two of them, Paul Gonsalves and Joe Livramento. Joe is actually my uncle, and Paul. Cape Verdean did us a lot of Cape Verdean, but Paul was from Pawtucket, but he wanted to play here, so he lived with my grandmother, so they were like brothers. And Joe Livramento, Paul went on to play with, first he went on to play with Count Basie, then from Count Basie, he went to Dizzy Gillespie, and then he went to Duke Ellington, and he played until he passed away with Duke Ellington. Yeah. And he had the famous solo at Newport Jazz Festival.
I've heard that solo before. It was fire.
That was Paul.
I told Dave about what I knew about Paul Gonsalves, which was very little. But I told him I was on a Detroit Fine Arts Breakfast Club Zoom, and we were talking about this, that, and the other, and I mentioned Paul Gonsalves and blah, blah, blah. And this young woman on the Zoom says, "Oh, I know exactly who he is." And I said, "Oh, really?" And she said, "Yeah. Is it Billy Eckstein, the arranger?" Yeah, Billy Eckstein, right?
Bill Eckstein was a singer.
A singer.
He had a big band.
Yeah, who was the arranger for Duke Ellington?
Billy Strayhorn.
Strayhorn. Mr. Dyslexia
Yeah,
here.
he wrote most of the tunes.
But she said that was my uncle.
Yeah.
So, small world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, Paul is known as from being from New Bedford. He wasn't from New Bedford. He's from Pawtucket. His family, but they were related to us. And he wanted to come here to play. So my grandmother let him come over and live with us. But he originally, his family, he's from Pawtucket. But he played all his jazz here in New Bedford until the two of them moved over to Boston, and then eventually they moved to New York. And Joe played with Jimmy Lunceford Orchestra, many years with Machito, and then he started doing a lot of Afro-Cuban music, Perado, and bands like that. Yeah.
I mean,
so I want to get that out. My passion is that they didn't just play horns. I just want to know let people know what they went through to get where they are.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know if your curatorial mind is spinning right now, but what a great exhibit that would make of New Bedford bass. As Dave said, that I learned from him. So if I speak a little smarter about jazz, it's only because I've been speaking with Dave and listening to his show, his podcast. New Bedford is sort of like, imagine this spot on a map, okay, or a dot on a paper. You have jazz that came into the city and they affected the jazz musicians, and then they had the jazz musicians of our city who left this city and affected the other. So it was this incredible synchronous.
And we had many more musicians that could have gone, but they decided they didn't want to do that for career. They were married. We had great players here that could have gone. And so when the guys from New York went Piccadilly up here on Union Street, they bring the bands from New York. And then after, guys would get invited, or during the afternoon, they go play with a New Bedford guy just for fun.
Wow.
And they wanted to take a lot of guys back with them, But the guys didn't want to do that for a career. Because it was a tough career, especially if you were married. Had kids, you didn't know where you're going to be next week.
Yeah.
And that still is a tough, career tough lifestyle to have, being an active person in the music scene now, getting to work with venues, booking, promoting, figuring out, if there's a band that's going to be available for a particular slot, and everybody except the bass player's available, so they're not able to do the show, or unless that maybe they're second in line, on the list or something. Right. So there's all these variables to manage, and it's difficult enough if you're single, but if you're a family and if you have kids or anything, there's a lot of other variables, or if you have a job outside of it, there's a lot of other variables to manage. So yeah, I commend
it's true.
A lot of musical creatives that do that as their full-time job, for being able to manage all those different variables.
Yeah. It is difficult because my mom was a circuit singer, the Portuguese-American circuit, but that circuit was from Ludlow, Chicopee, all the way down to Newark, New Jersey, Newark, Elizabeth. And being a single mom, the memories that I have is when she couldn't get a babysitter, I went on the road with her. And that's why I tell people I could sleep on a picket fence, because most of the time I slept on folding wooden chairs.
Yeah.
That's a visual for a painting. That's a really cool painting visual.
Yeah, I can still feel the fur from the ladies' furs and the smell of their perfume. And, and then, of course, there was all kinds of other crazy things like that.
Yeah. And then again, they might work 5-6 weeks in a row, and then they might go 5 weeks where they didn't have a job.
Exactly.
They didn't have any bookings, so to stop it, I'd go to New York and hang out with them. Yeah. Not basically because I wanted jazz, because I had a chance to go to New York and hang out. And I'd hang out with them during the day. And some famous musicians, I want names, borrowing the alto sax from another guy, because theirs is in a pawn shop. They haven't worked a while. So if I get this gig, then I can get my horn. This is the things that they went through.
Right. How about the contemporary jazz scene right now? Are you familiar at all with it, or is it completely different because everybody's so scattered? They're not as united as they used to be.
It's completely different. I follow some musicians, but it's completely different, and it's too many genres called jazz, And like I said, some of my friends are jazz police. They'll hear, that's not jazz, that's not that. So the word jazz is not the same as it was in the 50s and 60s. It was one type of music. And then And these guys were originators. They learned themselves. They didn't write much music. They'd get songs, maybe an Irving Berlin song, and then they'd improvise on it and everything. They didn't go to school in Berkeley, and they taught each other. They learned on the job. And now, I'm not knocking Berkeley, but now it's a different type of jazz. It's stuff that's been written and everything. It's not the real improvisation. Like those guys, they improvise on a proper song, like My Funny Valentine or something like that.
Or from Disney, Someday My Prince Will Come from Cinderella, which is kind of, like, wow, what a bizarre source when you stop and think about it, Yeah. Ymelda, do you have any musical background in family or yourself? Or
I do not. I a recorder. That was the extent of my musical.
Making mixtapes.
But I do like. I think we do often think about how to incorporate music into museums, into exhibitions, and kind of see that as kind of to have a more kind of different kind of immersive experience when you're experiencing art and history and different things that you're looking at. And so it is always interesting to hear musicians talk about what they're doing or the history of music and how you can. Some people they learn better, right, when they're listening to something. And so just thinking about that and how we can always integrate music. And then if you have records, if you have things that are actual material objects that reflect music, like how can you bring that to life when it's such like a visceral experience when you're listening to music, right?
When I think of jazz, I think about there's an order that's being played with, like in music sense, like if you're playing with different keys or if you're playing with like the layout of a particular song. But in curating, I'm imagining like if you're adding your own jazz, metaphorically to how you're approaching like the artist you're choosing, the space you're working with, how you're going to organize the pieces together, how you're going to present that. That's got a jazz-like element to that. Like, what do you think about when you're setting up an exhibit?
Right, definitely a composition, right? And like, having the right kind of balance. It definitely, you can definitely see like a correlation between the two, and different voices, right? And what can be reflected to make the most sense, right, to people walking through the
right, and the narrative isn't just the spoken word. In visual art, I mean, the way that a well-curated show has this incredible narrative. I mean, you're being led, almost like a fish to a certain kind of bait. You're being led from one painting to another painting, and then all of a sudden, when you see those head snaps, you know that, okay, this is working, Same thing with jazz. It's that incredible flow, and getting off the road and getting a little dangerous and like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get back? How am I going to get back? And what's amazing is that jazz musicians all know where everybody's at. And then, silly question I've been meaning to ask you forever. Are jazz musicians good mathematicians? Are they good at arithmetic?
Supposedly, good musicians are good mathematicians. They say I've read where they use the same part of the brain. Musicians and mathematicians use parts of the brains that most people don't use. So it's the same thing.
Yeah.
That's what I read about it.
Yeah. Was it Coltrane or was it Ellington? One of them made this really beautiful illustration of like a circle of fifths, and it had some math-looking elements to it, but it also had a very colorful. It was a beautiful like illustration, and he was kind of talking about how he was bouncing around these different keys. And I don't know if it was Coltrane or if it was Ellington, one of those two, but they made it like a math, and it was visual, and they were talking about like that structure of the like theory that they were using as they were improving.
Yeah, I don't know, but it sounds like it would be Coltrane, because that's how he took jazz. That's why I say jazz. The word jazz covers all kinds. I was always careful because people would. I went to jazz all the time when I was younger, and people say, "Take me to some jazz." I was careful what band I took them to see for the first time, so they wouldn't get turned away. I would take them to the guys that played the tunes that you knew and everything, because some guys are way out there. So I don't want to introduce somebody to that, and they think that's jazz.
The other thing too is I remember doing a lecture, and sometimes when you're teaching, you teach yourself something, because something comes out of your mouth and you go, I never ever thought of that before. I didn't know I didn't do that. And I try to explain during an art history lecture that it's like, okay, art is really math. And they looked at me like, and then you see the smarter kids, so to speak, they're processing and they think they have an answer, a retort to it. I said, no. Imagine a coin, and the coin is math, okay? And on one side of that coin is art. That's math seen. And on the other side of that coin is math heard. So the three are connected together in this really, really unique way.
Mm-hmm.
It does get ingrained in your head, right?
Right.
So people wondered, how could Mozart possibly compose without writing it down? He did no drafts, right? He did it cold, right? Are there musicians, jazz musicians, that you're aware of that were like that could score like on the spot?
Well, the guys I'm talking about, like Paul actually was a guitar player. He played Cape Verdean guitar, his father and his brothers. And then he joined my uncle. They were teenagers and become a little man. And then he started playing the sax after. But yeah, those guys, that's how they played. They picked a tune, like I say, My Funny Valentine or Green Dolphin Street, and they played it by the originals and they listened to it. And so now they knew the tune, and then they built on that tune. They did different chord progressions and stuff, made it jazz, but they were still playing that tune. They didn't have any schools of jazz in those days. They learned on the job. And they would have jam sessions, like a place like this would have a trio, and then all the other musicians would come and instruments. So the club got a lot of free musicians so they could play together. And then two guys would be playing sax, and one guy would do this, and they go, how did you do that? And so they learned from each other. And they always, all of them were individual. They wanted their own sound on the saxophone. They didn't want to sound like the other saxophonists. So they worked on that. They worked on all that. On-the-job training.
That element is still there. There's a really cool improv open session that happens at Poor Farm every Sunday.
Yeah.
It happens from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. There's usually a cool timeline, like Play Arcade usually has live music performance from 6 to 8 p.m. on Sundays, and then Poor Farm has their open jams from 8 to 10, and sometimes it falls over. But you can hear a similar pattern happening amongst the musicians at the Poor Farm jams. Like, there'll be multiple, like, brass instruments up there, or, like, saxophone players, guitars, and you can see them, like, trying to grab their own signature, and then also, like, kind of volleying back and forth with each other, almost like making these really cool shapes.
So is there, like, a spitting contest sometimes when you're doing this free form or you're doing jamming? Is there, like, a spitting... I mean, in other words, you sort of, like, tickle somebody, and they're like, oh, yeah? And then, so now it becomes this incredible tit-for-tat kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, well, that's what the jam sessions were. You know, 4 or 5, you'd come in, and I hadn't played for you for ages, but you came in, come on, bring your horn. So we had them rehearse together, right? And they would name classical tunes, you know, like I said, they played, like now there's a lot of original tunes, but in those days they played My Funny Valentine, like I said, something like that, and improvised on that. And then one guy would play it. And then what they would do on the jam session, you'd be sitting here, I'd be in the audience, you'd be happy because you see somebody come in, oh yeah, and then there'd be some guys that, oh my goodness, look who's coming in. And when they got in there, and the guys that went cooperative with them, I think, they would play harder stuff just to make them
open
get
it
off
up
the
a little
stage.
bit.
Yeah. And so they weren't asked to come up anymore,
There was a couple of years ago, I met Anthony Barboza, who is amongst the highest, the penultimate level of photographers in the country, commercial celebrity, you know.
Sure.
And in his book, and also in the conversation with him, talk about Small World, he started asking me questions, and I told him my wife was from Detroit, and he's like, "Oh, I know so and so." Like, I know that person. He's, "Oh, tell him." You know, so you know the universe shrinks sometimes, right? But he was the photographer for Miles Davis. Miles was not a warm and fuzzy kind of guy, from what he told me. And Anthony's like, I don't know why he chose me, but he liked me, so what the heck, a gig's a gig. But he trusted him implicitly.
Yeah.
Do you know that story?
Yeah. I knew Ron since he was born. That's why when I went to when Ron came here, I went to see him too, and some guy drafted me to do.
Well, that Ron is Anthony.
That's where we met. Where we met.
Ron is one of Anthony's 6 brothers.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
He's a photographer as well.
Yes. So what happened was Ron was taking pictures in New York, and they hired him to do one album cover of Miles, and it's a famous one, the red cover with a hat. And when Miles saw that, after that, he said, "I want that to be my photographer."
Great story.
But Ron did a lot of stuff.
Yeah. A lot of history in this town.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Ymelda, some of the upcoming things that are happening in the Whaling Museum, are you allowed to, you told us one.
Sure, yeah, that was the most, starting from just a few weeks away, but kind of what we've been talking about here. Next year, there's going to be a big, two big exhibits that are focused on Cape Verdean community, Cape Verdean through contemporary art and music.
Wow.
And so I feel like talking about history here, but then also talking about people's experiences in Cape Verdean communities around the world as well, and how they're similar to the diaspora, to people who live here.
Right.
And so it's going to be a big kind of celebration in the coming year. And so I'll be probably getting in touch with a whole bunch of people, including you.
I'll be glad to.
Yeah, to participate in some way, because we're going to have it's basically the Cape Verdean experience, but through contemporary art, and then also community storytelling, community
Is Candida
sharing.
Rose going to be a part of that?
Candida Rose is going to be a
Right,
part of that. Yes,
right.
yes.
Yeah.
And so it's been really interesting to connect with folks that are also in Pawtucket and the whole South Coast, all of this area, and then talking with some. I think something that the feedback we got from our own committee and from the community about what needs to be included in this kind of exhibit, it's music. Music was kind of one of the underlying themes. Like, this will not be a complete story if you don't include something about music and musicians.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Right.
Is there going to be? I don't want to pull out too many details, but as far as staging, is there going to be some cool lighting or video projection that might be going on?
We really hope so. Yes, yes.
I'd recommend Taylor Hickey,
okay.
amazing artist. She did some really cool residency work. I think it was a national park residency a couple of years back.
Yeah,
And,
I believe so,
She
yeah.
did some really fun video projection work.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other artists in this area that they're multimedia based, and if you bring in music and visual art or installation, they have a lot of really cool
Great.
spice to stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
yeah,
good to know. Yeah, I think again we're hoping for kind of one of those multi-layered experiences. In the galleries, right? That kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
And when,
Yeah.
when will this be?
So this opens in June of 2025, right? So, and then it will be in one of our main galleries that's on the first floor, Waddles, and then there's also going to be a space up on what we call the San Francisco room. But if you've ever been on the third floor, that harbor
Yes.
view room where you overlook,
Yes,
it's going to be up in that area. And so.
Yeah, I'm curious because when they started working on it, and I got called from somebody from New York if I would come down to the Whaling Museum. They interviewed me about what it was like as a kid, as a Cape Verdean.
That was for
And
Common
I've
Ground.
been-
Yeah.
I think Lopes was the guy's name. And I've been waiting to see if that was ever done. They were from New York. I didn't know them. Somebody recommended me. And we did it. He just had me talk. He didn't interview
No,
me.
it was part of the Common Ground exhibit and program that was developed or introduced by Dr. Akea de Barros Gomes, and she is now at the Mystic Seaport. And it was really, and then there were challenges because of the pandemic and all kinds of things going on. But it was really an interesting exhibit, and I think we just scratched the surface with that. There are so many stories.
Definitely.
So many stories.
I can look it up. I can see what how we've shared it. That's kind of the next step, right? Outside of so you do these story collection projects, right? You want to be able to have an archive of that, but then how do you share it with people? How do you bring it into projects that you continue to work on so that people actually hear the stories, have access to all of this great kind of history?
All my clothes, everything I had as a kid went on to Ernestina.
Wow.
The OK Verdeans who were so poor, they never threw anything away. When you didn't fit in there, it was Ernestina, there was other boats to come to Providence too, and everything. When they left here, the boat was full. A lot of times they had to throw some of the stuff off. Nothing, the Cape Verdean family threw nothing away because they saved it for the next chance they could get, send it to Cape Verdean.
Right,
They were so poor.
Yeah, great.
The Whaling Museum, as I like to tell people who it's not your fourth grade field trip anymore. You really have to go.
Yeah.
It's really, really evolves, not so much out of necessity, but that's what good curation is all about, and it's really an exciting exhibit.
Yes.
I think also just to be reflective of the community in which we live. It's this very art-centric, vibrant, diverse community here.
Right.
And so I just feel like it's nice that it is a space maybe that is reflective of everything that's going
Right.
on
Mhm. Right.
here. And like even on night to night, it was wonderful to see so many people kind of activating all those spaces around the museum.
Right.
And then we're going to be having an immersive jellyfish installation, jellyfish
Yeah.
made out of
Yeah.
recycled plastics by an artist, Katie Roddenwalker, who has a workshop right now. And all the names of all the community members, like over 200 people who helped to make these jellyfish, will be part of the exhibit, so people can come and see their work
It's
in person.
the stone soup of art.
I love it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and just to throw a pitch in, I mean, I've been speaking with the Arrudas from WJFD, Henry Arruda and Paulina Arruda, about a Luso-American exhibit or a Luso-American focus, because, I mean, I'm focused on it because my mother was a father singer on the circuit, but when you stop and think about the writers, the poets, I mean, it just goes on. So every one of us from an ethnic background, and we all come from ethnic backgrounds.
That's right.
Okay, have contributed an enormous amount to use that old term, the fabric of the city. And boy, if that isn't reflected in our art and culture, and to see it celebrated, it's been a long time coming. I used to say that, in Lucium Defundum, the translation is we guide the guiding light, or I can never remember. I remember the Latin, but I can't remember the English. And that for the longest time we put a bushel over that light, a bushel basket. And everybody was so negative about, blah, 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 it's Pitt City, this, that, and the other. I've had people who haven't been in this area for 30 years come back and like, oh my gosh, what happened? And we've had people coming in from out of town. My sister-in-law, the first time she came here from Detroit, she was like, holy moly. Our friends from the University of Miami that came up a couple of weeks back, unfortunately my wife and I had COVID at the time, so I had to play virtual tour guide. I was isolated. I mean, there was nothing else to do, right? And they said, well, we came here to see you, but next time we're just coming back to see and we'll see you too,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But it's that kind of excitement that we have going on here in the city.
It is. It's so good to see it. Yeah, I'm so happy to see it when I come down here Friday nights to listen to music. I'm looking around. I can't believe it, because I grew up. Everything was downtown, and all of a sudden there was nothing. And to see it back again like this.
There's a lot of active music venues, like small music venues in the downtown area.
Again, right.
We're in one of them right now, Play Arcade. Rose Alley's becoming like an active music venue. We've got, of course, Poor Farms, Iterion just opened up again, Art Museum, Gallery X. Missing anyone? Poor Farm. And the music scene that's kind of in the area that I'm a part of, like it's like a rock, punk scene. There's also jazz. There's also Buttonwood Park. There's brass bands. And so there's always something going on. And it's hard to keep up with, all the different dates. Like people will reach out to me through the siren and say, I've got this show coming up. And I'm like, can you send me a flyer? Just a flyer with the basic info, and we'll try to get it out there in front of as many eyes as possible. But yeah, almost every day of the week now you can start to find like some live music happening somewhere. And it ranges from like acoustic music, like one-man band like Butch McCarthy. Then you've got, someone help me with his last name, Neil. He's a regular at he's another legend.
Another musician.
Yes, Neil he performs all over the place.
I know.
Black Bass, Poor Farm,
Yeah, I know.
Cisco.
He's also McCarthy.
McCarthy, yes.
And there's Richards as well.
Neil McCarthy.
Neil McCarthy.
Neil McCarthy.
Yeah, right.
And so you've got like the smaller acoustic acts, one, two musicians, and you've got like the full like brass band, that plays the South Coast
Jazz
Orchestra.
Yes.
And again, like that calendar is still filled. We're already at the end of the summer. We're going into the fall season, but there's still a very, very active like music scene going on downtown. Kilburn Mills also is becoming like an active space, like the event center, Reggae on West Beach. Hatch Street sometimes has some really cool events that are going on over there that are music related.
In fact, so many things to write grant applications for, but we're trying to focus down on specific things like Alhambras. specifically. The Alhambras was the place to go to in the 70s and 80s, and then Billy Wood's Wharf, which is another legendary place. So there were things going on in between these things of our dad's and mom's generation. So it's funny. Hindsight is really 2020. When you look back on what happened, I mean, I was working at Freestones when they were only open a couple of years, and I remember, as I like to tell people, downtown was so depressed that we were actually the only light on downtown after a certain time. So, and to segue into AHA on the 25th anniversary, I remember coming down here with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, thinking, oh yeah, this is going to be good, and going, I have never, ever not been able to get a parking space in New Bedford. Where the hell are all these people coming from?
Great. They're hearing about all the cool stuff happening. And speaking of history and fabric, the exhibit that's at Gallery X right now, Portraits of New Bedford, Sig Haynes has a really beautiful painting there.
Oh my God, I would have never guessed that was a Sig Haynes.
There's a Sig Haynes there. Sig Haynes was one of the professors at the Swain School, so that's another really cool.
Yeah.
It was so industrial, you know.
history component of the area.
A Midwest painter, I can't remember his name, but he was very popular during the 50s, 60s. It was almost Midwest landscapes with grain silos.
Grant? You're talking about Grant?
Was it Grant Wood?
Wood.
Did he do those?
He did the farmers?
Yeah.
Grant Wood.
So yeah, we all only think of the farmers, American Gothic, but we never think of those other paintings that he did that were very industrial. Meaning silos, factories, incredible landscape. Yeah.
It seems like there's just so much opportunity for artists to like have a space where you can just experiment, show something new, like try and kind of work on your own practice and then meet other artists and kind of have a space for that, which is incredible. And I think not really something that I think it's dying in some places, right? That's kind of going away in a lot of places.
Well,
it's like a mecca here.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a special time to be in New Bedford right now. And like there's a lot of opportunities for artists, like in curating, in producing, and performing, and building, forming groups, independent studio practices with the 2 mill buildings, Hatch Street, Kilburn, and a couple of other studio buildings. We've got the amazing organizations that are like kind of independently but collectively doing amazing things, like NB Creative, of course, AHA Night, DNB, it's the Downtown New Bedford Inc. Like there's just this really cool set of teams that are in this area right now. They're trying to promote not just like what's happening, but also creating these cool opportunities for artists that want to build, with one another.
That's why I said, like at my age, seeing it like that when I was young, I didn't know which club to go to, which band to go see, and all. Then for years that didn't happen. So I'm so excited now when I come here Friday nights or whenever there's an event to see New Bedford like I knew it before.
Right.
We didn't know where to go. You'd see, like you'd be playing a month club, I go watch one set from you, run down to go see her set. You didn't even stay in the same club all night.
I mean,
So I'm glad to see that again.
Dave and I are the elder statesmen of this foursome here, but and he's got me by 14 years.
How old are you?
72, just turned this month.
Yeah, I'm 86. Yeah.
But I remember back in, when it was a mom and pop economy. There was just, going to school in the South End, which is I went to St. Anne's School, which is gone. That is the public safety complex down there now. But there were so many mom and pop places, from these little burger joints, diners, dinettes, they call some of them, lunch boxes or whatever. And then we see the evolution of things, and newer is not always better. Bigger is not always better. Remember the Circle Champlain, the Golden Arrow. I remember those names, and a lot of those had entertainment venues as well. So there was gigs everywhere in town.
Well, the industry that I was in is no such. After I retired, I saw Hostess cakes. There's no Hostess cakes, and they're made like canned goods because there's no stores to sell to. You bought it something, and you sold to the stores. And I used to do 35 stores a day. There's no stores. It's shards, so you can't have sales. So they are. Somebody's bought the name. And like when I got it right out of the bakery, put on my truck and went sell it to the stores. Now somebody's got the name and the markets order it like canned goods. It comes in boxes.
Ymelda, you're from Santa Fe, Taos, Santa Fe, New Mexico,
Santa Fe,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was a hot art scene and no pun intended because of the heat, for a long, long time. Is it maintaining itself, or I heard it's backsliding a little bit? I don't know.
I think it's changing, but
Really?
I think it's a really, it is a kind of an art mecca as well. It was there are so many artists kind of compounds and conclaves, and,
Right.
we're all familiar with the big names from people that were really just the landscape spoke to them, like, of course, Georgia O'Keeffe and the like.
Right.
But then, there were so many, there were different kinds of art there, and I feel like there's a burgeoning space over the past probably, 20, 30 years for contemporary art, for art that is not, I think a lot of people go there for maybe some of the landscape paintings and whatnot, but there's more to it, right? So I think it's changing, and maybe it's just a little different because the way that people, I think, buy art is different now, and the way that people, I think that has changed, and so
Right.
that might change kind of how towns like that operate.
Right. That seems to be going backwards by everything that I'm reading. Auction sales are really ticking people off. Online sales, people aren't really happy with it. Sales in general, the amalgamated sales are dropping, and people are wanting to go to a local gallery. Hopefully we'll be able to see more local galleries around here. When you came here, Ymelda, what was your first impression of town?
Of New Bedford?
Yeah.
I think it really was the arts community, or how much public art there is here, and then just how there's these neighborhoods, and there's a lot of community. I feel like I have never really kind of worked in a place where I really know a lot of people, and I haven't been here very long. And you meet everybody, and everyone's very supportive and always kind of just I guess just supportive. Like there's just
Well, I feel like we're coming into this really cool era where rather than having these isolated entities that are doing their thing,
or silos.
the silos. There's like this little bit of, it's not necessarily all merging together. There's still that independent, like different cycles of activity. People have different calendars they're working with, different budgets, different like specific agendas. But there's a little bit more of this like cross marketing that's happening, and there's a little bit more of this cross like collaboration that's starting to happen through individual projects. And there's also like this rise of awareness, I feel like, in the creatives where they're learning how to market themselves better, market who they're working with, market what their projects are about, and then parties that are funding, like sponsors or grants or bigger entities that are trying to like put these specific projects into the limelight. There's some better communications that are going on between those different parties. And so it's a really cool era that I feel like that's happening right now, because we went from having like a separation between like maybe businesses and the creatives. So now the creatives are becoming more business oriented, and they're learning how to kind of do their chores. Like if you have something you want to do, like okay, build a website for it, put your socials together for it. Who are you collaborating with? Does it need a grant? You're writing the grant. You have an idea of what you're doing 6 to 8 weeks in advance instead of 2 weeks in advance.
Right.
So there's a really big growth spurt that I think is happening in the collective community right now.
I think, to tell you the truth, and Dave, tell me if I'm wrong or right. Right would be nice, but I think what's going on now has been basically they've taken a page from musicians of way back when, because there was a network. Everybody knew everybody. You didn't burn your bridges. You didn't screw anybody because it got around. And artists, visual artists, were pretty much the silos. We lived and worked in isolation. And this interaction with other artists was a very, very rare thing. And now it seems it doesn't matter what your discipline is, what your genre is, we are all just artists. And that includes musicians. Under that umbrella of artists.
Well, I think it's a really interesting time because we've got this almost like a membrane that's kind of connecting us together. Like we've got AHA Night, for example, that's taken the arts and music and kind of pushing it into the entertainment sector a little bit. Now, artists don't identify as entertainers. Like some of them might be like as performing artists, but in general, we're focused on process, materials, concept, shows that we have coming up. But the fact that there's these entities that are kind of putting artists in this more entertainment facet, that then creates more potential for revenue to come, not just towards the artists, but also towards the businesses. So there's this really beautiful, like, delicate relationship that I feel like is growing within the city between, like, the creatives, the nonprofits, the venues, the small businesses, and the municipality. And there's, like, different, I guess, team leader type entities that are, like, taking the lead on, like, manning different projects or shows or large events. And there's also an open door for creatives who want to participate, at this capacity to be a part of making New Bedford more of a sensation for people who don't know about what's going on in this area to come here. It's becoming a little bit more of a magnet because of that really interesting combination of those dynamics.
And I'm going to throw in a pitch that's either apolitical or non-political, but it does really matter the administration of the city, town, municipality that you're in. And I told Mayor Mitchell the last time we spoke. In fact, he's supposed to have been on a podcast. I don't know how many times, but his schedule's written on quicksand. It's constantly shifting. But I said, I remember when you were elected, that the buzz around town was almost instantaneous. Have you seen this guy's office? And it's like, what's the thing about his office? He's got art from floor to ceiling in there. This has got to be a good sign. And it's one of those, like, kind of apocryphal kind of things that, what do you, and boom, look at, I mean, I left for Portugal, I lived in Portugal for a year, and in 1 year's time, the change was phenomenal when I came back. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have seen changes, obviously.
Oh, yes. And social-wise, it's changed because in New Bedford, in my time, everybody lived in a neighborhood. All you knew was the neighbors. The Portuguese were in the area, one Frontier. So the only time you knew kids when you were in school, you hung out with them in school, but you never socialized because you went back to your neighborhood and all that. And that's the thing I see. And I see my granddaughters, and they're bringing their friends from school and all that, from all over the world and all that. And I sit there, I don't tell them. Little that I would think I would see this where it's not a big, everybody's socializing,
Right.
After school, you didn't socialize with anybody else in the other parts of the city. Yeah. You went back to your neighborhood. Those are the only friends you know, unless you played ball.
Right.
And in fact, jazz at that time was in the Cape Verdean community, and we were separated. And I played a lot of sports. And a lot of the guys I played with from other communities would ask me, can we go with you so we could go see some jazz? So everything was separated. So now I sit back and I see musicians of all color, and every event I go, I see somebody I know, and in those days you only knew the people in your neighborhood other than in school.
It was weird. There was a weird social strata. Living on Earl Street, when I went to Immaculate Conception, we lived on the corner of Earl and North Front. Now, if you went below North Front, you weren't doing all that well, social economic situation, but those were the newly arrived Portuguese. And then from North Front up to the Avenue, there was a little bit of people have come up, and they came up pretty much a block, so to speak. And then if you were on the Avenue, it was like, oh yeah, you were riding pretty high. If you were on the Boulevard, okay, and that's where the French Canadians and the Polish were, because they had come back, here early in the 1870s or whatever. So now you could see everybody getting bumped up a notch.
Right.
And you're right. There were French schools, there were Portuguese schools, there was the Polish schools. Everybody stayed in their own neighborhoods. And crossing into neighborhoods, it was kind of a little weird. I think you and I had this discussion, and I tried to explain this to younger people, and they're staring at me like, okay, what are you, like, did you grow up with the dinosaurs? My mother was Portuguese. She was born in America, in the Yonkers. My father was French-Canadian, born here in the city. For them to get married back in the 50s was almost like an interracial marriage. It was like, oh my God, you just didn't do that stuff.
That's what I mean. At that time, like my parents, came from Cape Verdean, and the other Portuguese people, they lived like they were still there.
So you didn't go out of the Portuguese neighborhood. You didn't go into the French neighborhood. You know, so that.
Yeah. It's
That's the greatest thing I think is like my granddaughters, their mother's French and my father's Cape Verdean, and there's never any mention. They don't even know there's any difference. They're friends and all that.
Right.
And so it's I keep it to myself, but it's a good feeling to see this from the way it was.
So I'm going to ask each one of you, and I'll start with you, Ymelda. If you had a crystal ball, and I ask you to peer into it and tell me what you see in 10 years from now, what would your prophecy be? Just based on trend.
Based on trend.
Trend and yeah.
I feel like, I don't know. It could go. I feel like there will be maybe even more spaces for arts and music, and maybe I would hope that I would see folks outside of the downtown area. That there'd be more growth in the neighborhoods outside of downtown, right? That this kind of vibrancy we see here is going to expand. That would be what I would.
Okay, Kat. And then we're going to have to make space for our new guest. Yeah.
10 years, you said?
Yeah, 10 years time. It's just an arbitrary.
Okay. I imagine
point in time.
There would be some sort of permit available for busk artists to be able to perform outside throughout peak season, where there are people coming to check out New Bedford. Some sort of permit for busk artists, like visual artists, music artists, some sort of system to make that revenue available for them to make. I'd imagine the capacities for each venue that are open now to be regularly reached because more people are hearing about the city. The train, I don't know if it'll be here. They keep talking about it. The train might be here. Right now, the safety inspection.
Yeah, they've only been talking about that since the day I was born and since the time Dave was 12.
I imagine a couple of other, like, maybe production companies, like, planting themselves here that are in the entertainment, from, like, video production, music production, also maybe entertainment companies that help, like, independent venues, like, host events that are going on with different entities in the city through the different nonprofits or the municipality. The students that are in school now, whether it's business, art, communications, like, they're going to be a part of running bits of the city, either through independent businesses, nonprofits. So it's going to be neat to see Gen Z's, like, take on current dynamics. Right now it's like peak millennial season. BCC is, like, the only, like, school that's active in the downtown area now since UMass shut down. So it'll be interesting to see the impact that BCC's had as far as putting out artists into, the area. I imagine the museums are still going to be active. Art Museum, Whaling Museum. It'll just be neat to see the level of music performance activity integrated with visual art activity. I think the Kilburn Mills and Hatch Street will still be operating. Kilburn's probably going to be a lot more organized and booming with their event center. Reg is going to be over capacity. They'll probably have to have it multiple times.
Well, I think to tell you the truth, you just put two things in my head that were never conjoined. And one of them is I've been advocating for a public market for the longest time. My marketing students for several semesters did it. We did reviews in front of people the movers and shakers that can make things happen. And it was always that, there's always an excuse. Whereas in Europe, it's like, what's the problem? You do this and this and this. But when you talk about buskers and such, Haymarket Square with a public market, now not only do you have a place where people go because they're going there for sustenance, they're going there to, whatever.
Absolutely.
And then they're also going there for the pure entertainment of it.
Yes. I feel like we're growing, and there's definitely an upward spiral that's happening, and so I feel like other parts of the city are going to become more integrated with itself, and so things like marketplaces have a higher chance of opening up because they're in communication with other entities, to make that happen.
Right.
Taking notes from places like Newport, Salem, P-Town, we have our own fingerprint, we have our own, like, approach to everything, but I feel like, as we're starting to get better at, like, collaborating, communicating, and multiple parties and entities are looking at the larger scale of things, like from bird's eye view. I feel like we're just going to keep going in that direction, and artists are going to have a better understanding of just sending invoices in, to get paid for what they're doing,
exactly.
and musicians are going to know how to like book themselves, so there won't be as much of a need for middlemen.
No
like
more
management.
exposure. No more exposure for payment.
Yes.
Dave, and then one of you three needs to give up your seats so that we can get our new guest in.
Before I ask you this, you said since 12 years old I was worried about the train coming. The train was here when I was 12.
Oh, was it? It came in wet.
When I was a kid, but I remember the train. It was the Second World War. I was walking down almost every day saying goodbye to the men. The train was down here. They take them to Fort Evans, go to the war. So that's why I remember the train. So what was your question, though?
If I gave you a crystal ball and I told you to look 10 years from now, so 2034, what do you think you would see in that crystal ball?
Well, from what I see, like I said, my granddaughters are in college, and they bring friends from all over the country, from even out of the world. They're at Harvard, so kids from France, so they come home on weekends. And I see them sitting down there from all over the universe and talking, and they have the ideas. They have that progressive idea, and it's just normal to them to do something better. One kid, this is how I'm doing this in the grade. And I think this generation will cooperate more and advance together. I think I see this togetherness that I never saw from all over the world. They're from all over the world when they come to the house. In fact, one of my granddaughters just came back from Madagascar. I thought it was a big deal when I went to Providence.
I'm sorry, all I can think of was Chris Rock when he said that. Oh, all right. Yeah?
I got to take off.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
And
Thank you.
We've got to get together for some coffee.
Connect definitely.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Thank you. Christine, jump on in. The seat's still warm.
Sorry, it's hot in here, I feel like. So I got a little...
Yeah. Oh, you good? Dave, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
No problem. I didn't know we were going to do this. I just thought I was going to come by and say hello. Again, you got me.
It's good to see you. Let me shake your hand, sir. We got to go for coffee.
So good to meet you. Yes. Yeah. Oh, if you ever want to do an interview about that, let me know. I can give you my card, my contact info, and we'll put it out there on here.
Doesn't matter which way.
Okay.
Yeah, you definitely got to do an article on Dave.
All right. Thank you so much. So good to meet you.
Yep. Good night, Dave. Thank you. Well, we have a new guest that's arrived, and I'm not going to do like I do on a regular podcast. I'm just going to introduce. Thank you, Christina Maiato Fitz Gerald. While we're waiting for Sean to come back with your drinks, tell us what's going on at Groundworks.
Oh, at Groundworks. Okay.
Yeah, how could you forget that?
That's right. I'm like,
it's elemental.
It is elemental. Thank you, Ron. So the I got some right here. Thank you. Yeah. So the show at Groundwork is called Elemental. It's about the universal energy flow of life. There is 7 artists, myself included. 59 pieces, I think.
Wow.
That's a lot.
That's a big show.
It's a big show.
35 is a big show.
Yeah. 59. And 59, yeah. And Tammy Meehan invited me in. She's the curator. She's also one of the artists. Mm-hmm. It's a great show. So the opening is on Saturday, September 14th, from 3 to 5:30.
Excellent.
And it runs until October 17th.
All right. So we've been all over the board here. We had Dave Reis, who just left.
Yeah.
Who's our jazz series podcast host on the South Coast Artists Index. Mm-hmm. And we had Ymelda Rivera Laxton, who is the assistant curator of contemporary art at the Whaling Museum. And the key word in her title is contemporary.
Oh, okay.
Because there are still people who don't get the term contemporary, and the ones that do still don't get it. Like, wait a minute, it's a museum. Well, you know, all the stuff that was in the museum, as she sort of alluded to, was contemporary in its day, right? So it's been a really great conversation. And then, you know, Kat Knutsen, who is one of our biggest cheerleaders for the Artist
Absolutely.
Index.
Yes.
Well, I
really.
think it's really important what you're doing. I think it's amazing. I've always had a passion for understanding different bits that made it into the history books and
Yep.
who was, you know, boots on the ground paying attention to what was going on. And so y'all are doing a really great job, like collecting all of this archival, really important information of the active creatives that are making this area what it is as it's growing.
Well, you know, it's funny because you were like one of the first people to. I don't want to use the word. Well, appreciate is acceptable, but also got me to thinking about. What I thought I was doing was just fulfilling an agenda. Jeff said, do podcasts, I did podcasts. And then it got to a point where I realized that, oh my gosh, I'm the luckiest guy in the entire city. I've been able to have these one-on-one conversations with more artists than, you know, maybe Don Wilkinson would be like, you know, another, either beats me or I'm, you know, neck and neck or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not about numbers, but it's just about this incredible thing. While I've been saying this, guess who came back with the drinks? Sean FitzGerald. Please introduce yourself and show them a much better male radio voice than I have.
No. Sean FitzGerald here. It's a pleasure to be here, Ron.
Thank you for coming.
With the lovely Kat Knutsen and Christina Maiato Fitz Gerald. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
You are, sir. Yes, thank you.
Heard a lot about you.
Yeah, I heard a lot about you.
Keep an eye on you and you. So this is great, Ron.
Yeah. Oh, and before I forget, I want to thank you for helping us at the Artist Index make history, because you're the first live performance we've ever videotaped. And I did a podcast with Andrew Tedesco yesterday, the day before, and he said, you guys got to stop breaking out from, and I said, we already, you know, did one, and we're going to do more.
Great.
And so we've come up to a level we didn't even expect to be at.
Yeah, it was. You guys did a phenomenal job. You had two folks there, 3 cameras, I think it was, and you fought through some rain. And we got 4 of our originals recorded, which is great. The singer for the NB Rude Boys, amongst other things, and a ska band out of New England. And we performed down at Cisco back on July 28th, part of a Summer Vibes Festival with the incredible Bim Scala Bim, the Rins, Sunshine Melodies. I forget who else, I'm sorry. DJ Shizzy Mac. Yeah, so that was a great time. And Ron set up the guys from Spectrum. Ron and Jeff set up a couple of engineers to come down and videotape our performance for our originals. And great job, really phenomenal.
Thank you. Thanks for being the first.
Yeah, thanks for, you guys were gentle with me too, so I appreciate that.
And speaking of firsts, Sean will be shortly dropping your first podcast. Sean is, well, I'll let him tell you what he is.
Sure. Ron was kind enough to ask me. It was an honor to be asked. But we're doing it's a documentary podcast presentation. It's called the Gallery X Documentation Project, actually. And thank you. And we are bringing in folks who were there from the beginning, essentially trying to get as many folks that were there at the beginning. Folks who've been elemental in the Gallery X progression over the last 35 years. And it's been a lot of fun. We've got 5 of them done so far. Got another 3. I'm hoping to get I wanted to do a collective on Joe Raposa.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about getting his daughter, Tom Short, maybe a third person to come in and talk about Joe, maybe for that last podcast. I think he's such an important. Everybody I talked to, since you asked me to do this, I really dove in with the help of this lovely woman, Christina Maiato
Who's
Fitz Gerald.
in the deep background working as our documenter.
Yes.
The scanner extraordinaire.
Christine's been scanning away.
That would be me.
Yeah, she's been scanning away.
Scanning the night away. Yeah.
Pretty interesting.
What have you been scanning, Christine?
Everything and anything Gallery X from day one. Articles, posters, postcards. It's interesting. It's interesting.
Right, so this is a great initiative that Ron's
And thank you, Ron.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
there's so much history there that needs to be.
it has to be documented, and
It
it has
really
to be re-remembered.
Oh, I like that word.
Yeah,
That's a
re-remembered.
good word.
But there's so many great. We've seen some incredible graphics, and they're vintage. I mean,
Yes, they are.
35 years. Some of the they're definitely vintage. And one of the things that we're planning on doing is, as a fundraiser for us and for Gallery X, is since we've already got them scanned, is to offer some of these vintage posters from the early days of Gallery X as fine art prints.
Nice.
They'll look lovely hanging in your wall.
They really will.
Yeah.
Now, are all those scans going into a database that's being protected, archived?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes,
Yeah.
I am scanning everything. I'm doing everything by year and listing as precisely as I can what the document is, whether it's a newspaper article, if it's a poster, and digitally saving it in folders to be archived. Where are they going to be archived? Do we know yet?
Yeah, I can't say though
Okay.
until we have ink to paper.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's so many things going on at so many different levels, and we're working on another project that is going to bring together 3 or 4 entities in the city of arts organizations, nonprofits, into this one massive collaborative that I think is going to be, to use a really old-fashioned term, it's going to be really, really cool.
It's going to be lit.
It's going to be
So
lit.
cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or the Portuguese word for it is giro. Giro.
There's another really cool event coming up at Gallery X, Sean, isn't there?
Yes, Kat, actually there is. Funny that you should ask.
Clumsy segues.
This has become the Gallery X moment here.
The Gallery X portion of our programming.
Gallery X will be holding their 2nd annual Gallery X Music Festival Orgy. Yay! September 28th from 1 to 7 p.m. Right now we've got lined up for that event. We've got large acts upstairs in the main gallery. We're going to have Ymelda, Pumpkinhead Ted.
It's a lot to remember.
We're going to have Jimmy Gouveia Trio. We're going to have
Possibly Long Swan.
Long Swan. Kat is also the keyboardist, vocalist, and writer for Long Swan. Did you mention that?
Did briefly, but not those details. Thank you.
Yes. Among other things. And Kat was instrumental last year in the first Gallery X Music Fest we threw together. Her band performed, but she also, we threw it together last minute because the city had stopped the folk festival.
Right.
We felt something was needed. Jeff Angley picked up the ball, did the first Roots and Branches. We decided to try to make it not just an acoustic type thing, but just all music, all genres. And we started that a little late in August. Kat, I called her, and with her talents, she drew up a wonderful graphic that we used. Have to talk to you about the next graphic for this.
Let me know. Send a text.
Yeah, for sure. And Kat performed there, and she is such a valuable member to this community. Not just her talents as an artist, as a teacher, as a performer, but really as an inspiration to all of us. And,
As a cultural cheerleader.
oh my goodness! Like,
I love it. I love being around creatives. I love being around performers, organizers, promoters, and there's so much magic in this area. Sometimes it's fun to play matchmaker like, so-and-so, you need to meet so-and-so because, you might do a really cool collaboration together. Or you need to go talk to this person because they're looking for such and such right now. So there's just a lot of joy in like trying to bring different parties together and try to align the calendars with stuff that's going on. And that's why I have to go back and like do shout outs for organizations like NB Creative, AHA Night. Without those types of entities, I don't think we'd have that level of teamwork that's going on in the city right now. So I'm honored to be a part of that.
It's a really open landscape. There are no enclaves, no niches, no, the exclusive areas or whatever. Everybody is, and that's another page from the musician's Bible, so to speak, is that everybody knows everybody, and everybody is gigged with or collaborated or supported or whatever, so that, again, you've got a good reputation. It's golden. There are very few bad reputations. I mean, I'm sure if we put our heads together, we can come up with a list. There's always those people. But seriously, it is the most vibrant, most forward-thinking, most open-minded, most accepting, diverse, equitable, and inclusive, community that you could possibly think of.
I totally agree.
Yeah, I think the fact that there's now more projects that are starting to surface that are trying to archive that and examples of that and where that came from, whether it's like Gallery X, Swain, the Artist Index, the jazz, podcast that's starting up. The fact that there's more projects opening up to try to highlight, how that happened, that turns into like fuel and education material and catalyst material for like next gen energy that's going to continue that, to carry that torch in those different directions.
I'm going to do a brief advertisement, promotional thing.
Sure.
We're looking to do more series, and the series, just as a template we've been using, is a 10-episode series, and we're looking to do an LGBTQ plus series because we want to spotlight LGBTQ artists, but we also want to get a conversation going where it's appropriate to recognize those artists of the past that had to be in the closet, in the shadows, running that, on that line, which is really, really important, okay? The other one is the Swain School. We want to get an underwriter to do a series and a continuing series on the Swain School. There are just so many stories there, and there are, the graduates of that institution are getting older, and they're starting to pass. I think back in June we lost 6 all in one whack. This Gallery X, which we're working on, and this is only like the first step in a very large program. And you know what? Anybody who's listening and has an idea of something that they think should be documented, come on up. I mean, we talked about doing the Alhambra era. We talked about the Billy Woods Wharf era. I'm sure there are other parts that if we don't remember, it'll be forgotten. And that's always been one of our commitments.
It's interesting hearing you talk about this. You have galleries, you have museums that typically feature works of visual art. You don't really have many museums for music, and this city in it of itself is a museum for musicians and music. I mean, the people that have come through this city over the years that are still performing, some of the families that have had success internationally, the Antunes.
Let's put our heads together. Beaver Brown, Boston.
Oh yeah.
Tavares.
Antunes.
The Antunes hit a couple of those marks.
Yeah. Montero.
Yes. It's a lot of it comes from the Cape Verdean community. Paul Clayton, the granddaddy of folk music, who wrote 6 of Bob Dylan's biggest hits. Oh my gosh. Then there's all the jazz musicians, Paul Gonsalves, Coleus. I mean, it's Bobby Green. It just goes on and on and on.
I was fortunate enough to take Bobby Green's his history of rock and roll class my freshman year at SMU back in the day.
That had to be something. And even back then at SMU, the vibe, and unfortunately, it's like this candle. It's burning its way down to the bottom. When I was at SMU, I was stage manager for what was supposed to be the theater, but they turned it into an auditorium. It's a long story. It's an ugly story. But anyway.
So Angus Bailey?
Angus Bailey, yes.
Okay.
I mean, I was there for Ravi Shankar. I met Rod Stewart.
Were you there when they had
Anthony
their
Burgess from Clockwork Orange. I mean, this is a cow pasture, former cow pasture in Dartmouth. World class. Frank Zappa. Okay? We were in the number 3 stop on the Dylan Rolling Thunder agenda. I mean,
The Clash played there, too.
The Clash,
played there.
exactly.
The Police played there.
Meatloaf played there.
amazing.
Steel Eye
Wow.
Span. I mean, of course, there's the Istefans, which brought in all the British English music theater and all the other things.
Were you there when they had their own version of Woodstock?
Yeah,
Assuming.
actually, yes and no. Because I was such a good kid, I didn't give my boss, Ed Pickard, at Gulf Hill Parlor an excuse because everybody had abandoned ship.
They banged
so
out.
I stayed there and I worked all those extra shifts.
That's right.
And when Star Wars, the first Star Wars came on, you know the Star Wars bar?
Yeah.
I felt like the bartender in that scene because every stoner that could manage to get his way from the UMass campus to Gulf Hill Parlor was there. And you know what it's like trying to sell an astronaut sundae to someone who has to pick, I think, 27 flavors? It was brutal. So I saw performers, I saw attendees, I saw everything go. I served somebody ice cream.
And how long did that thing go on for?
I think it was 3 days. And there were funny
Do you know
stories.
about that?
No,
So
this is news.
SMU had their own mini
It was called
Woodstock.
the Woods of Dartmouth.
The Woods of Dartmouth.
It was
And
the second largest outdoor venue in the United States. Second only
largest.
second only to Woodstock.
at that time.
What
Yeah.
happened?
That's a really good point, not just for that, but for
That should be a podcast.
the pressure gauge, that was running that steam engine. I mean, there were funny things too. People were skinny dipping in Citadel Pond, just like they saw in the Woodstock movie,
Right.
until they realized the Citadel was infested with leeches.
Yeah.
Of course, that made for some interesting foreplay. And
So they didn't have a budget for security.
they didn't have a budget for anything. I think
I forget who
10
they
years to
had.
pay off the bills.
Right?
They
Yeah.
had some really good acts.
Oh yeah, they had the Ides of March.
Yeah, it's a march.
They had the Birds. They had a group called Rhinoceros.
It's a march. Wait. It's a march. They
Billy,
do that song.
I'm your vehicle.
I'm a vehicle,
I'm your
baby.
vehicle, baby. They had the Who from Canada.
No, sir.
You know how now again another reason why I couldn't attend. My SATs were scheduled as well. So if I wasn't at the SATs, I was at working. You know how hard it is to take your SATs when you're hearing American Woman. Okay, boom, 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 right? I mean, da, 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 right, right. It was bizarre. It was bizarre, and we could hear it from Dartmouth High School, almost as loud as it was at SMU. And the instructor, the proctor, adjusted the volume because we had awning windows, and that's how they adjusted the volume because nobody wanted him to close the windows. Right.
Oh,
so
funny.
there's another great podcast series.
Yeah.
Hey, look,
lot of music.
if Boston National Public Radio can do a series on the Big Dig,
Yeah, why not?
right?
Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot here. We're blessed. And to follow up on something you were saying, Kat,
We got about maybe 10 minutes or so.
are they going to play us the music? They're going to play us out the piano?
Oh, I wish. And
So, you know what though, Ron? In a lot of what's going on, I'm seeing it's inspiring other people to do
Yes.
similar things.
That's
you know?
what it's supposed to do.
Exactly. It's
Because
great.
people have only so much energy,
Very true.
and they only have so much they can see. And everyone's got blind spots, and everyone's got different talents and different
Very true.
drives.
And it seems like for so long, this area was
it was negative.
It was negative,
It was negative.
especially the pre-2000.
Right,
It was
right.
rough getting through the
Right,
late
right.
80s and the
Right,
90s and
right.
a couple of bad incidents, publicly, criminally. So it's wonderful to see this renaissance, really, for lack of a better word.
Well, I just want to throw in, speaking of inspiration of Miss Kat Knutsen here. I don't know if a lot of people know, but Kat is my former professor.
I didn't know, and I know
She
you
is
both.
my
I
former
got to
professor.
work with the amazing Christine at BCC in the art careers class.
That's right. And I remember talking to you. I don't know if you remember this conversation. I remember
do.
talking to you about going to UMass and picking my major. And I I'm like, I don't know what to pick. I love painting and I love photography. And she said, well, you don't have to choose.
You don't.
And I'm like, wow. It was a aha moment, no pun intended or pun intended for this evening. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for Kat, because I really thought I had to pick something. So I am involved in collage and painting and photography and drawing and
Event coordination.
Right. I have my resume, which you helped me with in careers. But
Business ownership.
yes, yoga, and I'm doing all these things because of Kat. And she was an inspiration to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, she draws and she paints and she does film and animation and all these things. So thank you, Kat.
I'm honored. So I think I went to school in an interesting time. I'm early millennial. I went to school during a time when postmodernism was very popular. Concept art became very popular. It was more about what you write instead of what's going on in the studio. And I loved the idea of traditional technique. And then I also loved the idea of, well, how are we going to get a job outside of this? And at the time, they were telling us, go become a professor, which I did. And in hindsight, knowing what I know now, what I tell students is learn about business development, learn about communications, marketing, learn how you can help make a difference in an area that you care about, and then take the craftsmanship that you have with your materials and then find a way to integrate that with what you're passionate about, and always try to help make something better, like help somebody do something that they're trying to get done, make their life a little bit easier. And so mixing that up, like going to school in a time when they said, well, what is your art about? Why are you making this? That plus like a passion for like community engagement, and a bit of an extrovert, there was this really cool combination. And it wasn't just me. There's like multiple students in my class that had a very similar drive. They went in different directions. I was a part of a class from UNC Asheville and then also Central Piedmont Community College in Charlotte, where I witnessed art scenes like in Charlotte and Asheville, Austin, Texas. So when I came to New Bedford, and I came from this community, everybody was active in the scene. They were either business owners, performers, designers. They were wearing multiple hats. So when I first was introduced to like an art community, I was introduced to something of what New Bedford looks like now, but in a different way. Like Charlotte had like South Boulevard, we had the Noda North Davidson scene. Asheville had the River Arts District. Austin had stuff going on 6th Street.
Right.
There's a whole music scene out in Austin that's really big. So when I came to New Bedford in 2012, it reminded me of those areas, but just in a little bit more of an incubated state. Like we were just coming out of that time where everybody went shopping to the shopping malls. People were starting to spend more time downtown. Rent was still very affordable. You had all these creatives that were just like, doing these really cool collective like collaborations, but everything was still separated. There was still a lot of separate.
And that's why I asked Ymelda Rivera Laxton, coming from, Santa Fe Taos. I think she's Santa Fe. The contrast, how being in that was still is an exciting place, creatively, a creative center, and then coming here to New Bedford, and her thing was like, wow. I mean, that in itself is a compliment, right?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we're up there.
Oh yeah.
And that is important. It's
very important.
It's not a spitting contest of any sort, but there's a community pride, and I think that there's just a couple of things going. One is, and I'm really slow on the simple things, and I'm really fast on the difficult things, supposedly. And one of the things is, right now we are making history.
Yes.
And we're documenting this history, as we're documenting the history of things before us.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've created as a creative community is opportunities that we never had. Because back then, 20, 30 years ago, what do you want to do that for? How are you going to make a living? Of course, some of those attitudes still exist comparative to Europe. And I've said it 100 times about in Portugal, oh, what do you do? I'm an artist. Oh, you're an artist. You know, they go crazy. Over here, what do you do? I'm a painter. Oh, you make any money doing that?
Yeah, they almost feel bad for you if you're a creative.
Exactly.
They haven't connected the worlds yet. And like one thing I want to mention is like I'm a part of a group of artists. Like from before I moved to New Bedford, moved here from Asheville and Charlotte. There was a collection of us that scattered across the country. You know, and we kind of made this pact with each other where we were like, you know, okay, we're going to give this art life a try. We're going to give this art thing a try. Some of us went to the museum school in Boston. One of us went down to New York. One of us went out to Chicago. There was a couple that went down to SCAD. I'm the only one that came over here to the UMass Dartmouth scene. There was one that went down to Australia. But we scattered and we all made this pact with each other that we were going to try to stick with the art for at least a solid 15 years. And of that pack, there's like 2 or 3 of us who are still active. And the communities that we were a part of, like there was a little bit of a burst of energy because we all came from that very like art collective community scene in Charlotte. And so New Bedford's like one of the stronger groups that has evolved since that pact was made. Another one is in right outside of Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Right. Oh yeah.
And then
I'll talk about Jazztown.
Yep. And then another one's up in Boston. One of the friends that went to the museum school, and actually the guy that has the exhibit at the art museum right now, Alex Buchanan.
Yes.
They were peers with each other, so it's like the big world becomes like a little bit smaller.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's such a cool time to be in New Bedford right now.
Hey, speaking of time, we have to wrap this up, unfortunately.
Aw, bummer,
Nice segue.
man.
And that's always. I don't know about the podcast that you've done, but it's just like when you look at your watch and it's like, oh my God, only 10 minutes have gone by.
Right.
And then you look, because you want to make sure you stay on time. And then you're looking like, I only got 10 minutes left.
Right, it's just getting good.
And we're just getting good. We're just getting good.
Thank you so much, Ron.
Oh,
Well,
so
thank you,
one
Ron.
more
Bye,
time,
Christine.
I'm going to close out Christina Maiato Fitz Gerald, her other half, and Sean Fitzgerald. Yeah, I know that. I know. I was trying to say something not stupid and not sexist
It's
or
tough
you know.
when you use Sean Fitzgerald in a sentence. It's tough to not say something stupid. That is in the sentence.
Well, even I was going to ask you someday about
Sean G.
yeah, Sean Fitzgerald. You must have had him. Anyway, in middle school must have been horrible. And Kat Knutsen, right?
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Appreciate
And
this.
folks, thanks so much for joining us for another AHA. I think this is our 5th one. I'm losing track. We're here to celebrate AHA, but specifically the vitality that AHA has injected into the city, into this community. And happy birthday, AHA. Happy
birthday,
25th.
AHA.
Happy AHA Day.
Happy
Yes.
number 25.
Five.
AHA's better than uh-oh.
Yep. And I don't know who used to say it, the sign off like this, but it's bye-bye. We're done.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.